You're listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast. We're an independent, general interest bookstore putting great reads in the hands of people in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. Hosted by resident Skylighters, we're here to bring you new and exciting author conversations, group reads, and bookseller chats. Happy listening.
Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome to SKYLIT. This is the SKYLIT Books podcast, and I'm your host, Hallie. Today, we're welcoming Oliver Milman to discuss his new book, The Insect Crisis, out now from Norton. Before I introduce him, I just want to remind you that SKYLIT Books offers curbside pickup and online ordering on our website, www.skylitbooks.com. And now, on to the show. Oliver Milman is a British journalist and the environment correspondent at The Guardian US. He lives in New York City. The Insect Crisis, published by Norton, is his first book. Welcome, Oliver. I'm so happy to have you.
Great to be with you. Hi.
Hi. So just to get us started, I'd love to hear a little bit about, this is your first book, why you wrote the book, why now? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think if you told me a couple of years ago that my first book would be about insects, I don't think I'd quite believe it. I've been writing about the environment, climate change, those kind of topics for quite some time now. And when you write about conservation, usually it's about, the big charismatic creatures of our world, the rhinos, the orangutans, the lions, and so on. And so the idea that insects would be important enough to write about in this way, or would be in trouble because obviously they seem so ubiquitous, they seem everywhere. The idea that they could be in kind of some kind of dangerous decline would seem quite fanciful to me. So I'm kind of surprised as anyone really to find myself in this position to be writing about them. But having seen all the research that's come out in just the last few years and spoken to the scientists involved in it, it's become clear. I think this is the kind of probably the great conservation issue of our age. I mean, it is a kind of a global crisis that we haven't really wrapped our minds around yet, let alone acted in any way to do anything about. And I think seeing some of the research papers showing declines of kind of staggering degrees, down insect numbers down 3/4 in Germany, 97% down in a place in Denmark, the rainforests of Puerto Rico down kind of another 90 odd percent since the 1970s. I mean, these are quite amazing declines of insects, and it really kind of shocked me, to be honest, to see that. And I kind of thought, well, I think people need to know more about this. I need to kind of explore this a bit more, and that was really the kind of genesis of the book.
Yeah, wow, that 97% decline is terrifying, and probably quite noticeable in that place too, I imagine. You mentioned the charismatic creatures of our time, like rhinos. And do you think that insects kind of lack or perceived lack of charisma is part of why people don't maybe notice or tend not to care as much about their protection?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, insects are 3/4 of all named creatures in the world. And yet we don't really think about them that much. And when we do, we kind of see them as annoying pests in most of the time. I think most of us kind of have an understanding that bees are important for us in terms of pollination, and butterflies are beautiful, and fireflies are very pretty. But most of us kind of think of them as being annoyances or irrelevances. But as compared to those kind of larger, more beloved creatures, insects are kind of far more important. I mean, they're responsible for the pollination of 1/3 of the foods we eat, and the good stuff as well, the fruits and vegetables that actually provide nutrition to our diet. So, lose insects and you have mass starvation, you have mass malnutrition. It's a complete disaster. Lose rhinos and it would be a terrible crime. It would be a horrible shame. You wouldn't upend the world as we know it. The loss of insects is happening now at a kind of frightening rate, and we are seeing a kind of cascade of consequences from that. unlike that of anything we're seeing through kind of biodiversity losses in any other kind of realm of our world.
Yeah, but I feel like we might not see like an insect on a billboard that says like save the mosquitoes or something.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? When we say we call them creepy crawlies, which is quite a kind of rude thing to say, isn't it?
Right.
And we say that people are bugging us if they're annoying. I mean, our whole system of language and thought is kind of geared to be kind of anti-insect. We see them as kind of pests and kind of irritating, but actually they're holding up life as we know it, and doing so for free, really.
Because they don't know how else to exist. I think maybe because we think cockroaches will outlive us all, so I don't actually know how important cockroaches are, but the idea that they are very resilient probably transfers over to other insects as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was one of the things I did learn through the writing of this book, is that some of the things we hate the most are actually quite useful. So cockroaches, like you say, everyone is pretty much revolted by cockroaches, but there's kind of like 5,000 species of them. Only 2 of them are the ones that hang around in our home. The rest of them provide a really kind of important function in the ecosystem as food for creatures much larger than them, birds and so on. But also kind of they help cycle nutrients through soils and plants and so on. So the kind of whole health of places that we love and rely upon, forests, grasslands and so on, really depend on a lot of these insects, including cockroaches, mosquitoes too. I mean, as much as we despise mosquitoes, and they are carry kind of a deadly threat in many parts of the world, they are another important link in the food chain. They do pollinate some plants. The idea of wiping them out completely would seem very attractive to most of us, but it would actually have a kind of quite a few kind of knock-on consequences we wouldn't really welcome.
Yeah. You mentioned the language around insects and pests, which I love that idea that our language system has kind of like prevented us from seeing them as anything but a nuisance. And the language in the writing in your book is really beautiful also. And I wonder if you would mind talking a little bit about the writing process and how it was maybe different from your journalism. Because it's a beautifully written book.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, so I mean, I'd never tackled anything as long as this before, of course. And so I kind of saw it as kind of a very long form journalism piece. But of course, the whole rhythms and structure of publishing is different from journalism. So I kind of had to quickly kind of adapt to that. But essentially, the structure of the book opens with a kind of prologue looking at what the world would look like without insects. And that's an extremely grim place that we would maybe survive only a couple of months in. Luckily, that's not going to happen. We're seeing a diminishment of insects, but they're not all going to completely die out. So I then go into the science of what researchers have been finding in recent years on insect declines, why this is happening. I went to central Mexico to see the migration of the monarch butterflies from the US and Canada down to the mountains of central Mexico. And there's a chapter on that. And there's a chapter on the usefulness of bees to our world. And so I went to the Central Valley in California to see the huge shipments of pretty much all honeybees in America to that area to pollinate the almond crop. And just looked at how that kind of system is being strained by the pressures that bees face. So I managed to do a little bit of travel, kind of late 2019, early 2020, before the kind of pandemic shutdowns began. So I was kind of fortunate in that way. And then the rest of 2020 was spent kind of huddled in a small apartment in Brooklyn, kind of finding time to bash it out into some kind of coherent sense. And luckily I had no real life outside that. In 2020, for obvious reasons. So I did at least have the time to focus on the book, as much as I would not like to repeat that time again.
The perhaps scariest writing retreat in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, I had two kids aged under 5 and quite a neurotic wiener dog as well. So it's kind of like the opposite of a kind of Zen-like writing retreat. That would be what I had, but somehow it got done and I hit the deadline.
Great. That's wonderful. Just trying to picture a neurotic wiener dog attempting to help you, right?
He's very needy. He's a very needy dog. We love him, but he needs a lot of care.
Yeah. So that you use the word or the phrase tiny empires in the subtitle of your book. And that kind of insects are everywhere. How could it be tiny? Is there a way to think about insects and their networks that, makes them more global, like a kind of continuous network of little creatures, or are insects isolated from one another and from, how do they kind of exist in the larger fabric of the planet?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think for our purposes, insects certainly do work en masse because they support our agriculture, really. About a third of the food we eat, like I was saying, is pollinated by them. We wouldn't have apples, cranberries, melons, broccoli, cherries, and so on. Without them, we wouldn't have chocolate or ice cream, unfortunately. Without them, and without them in huge numbers. I mean, millions and billions of insects are needed for that pollination process. I mean, insects themselves are, I mean, you may just see them as solo a lot of the time, but a lot of them organize themselves in quite kind of complex societies. I mean, ants, for example, are fascinating creatures. And I remember poking around under rocks when I was a kid, looking at kind of intricate tunnels they build and the way they kind of diligently worked as a team. I mean, looking into this book, you find out about all kinds of incredible things about ants. I mean, some of them are so organized that they have paramedic ants whose job is just to kind of go out there and carry off injured ants and carry them back to nest to tend to them. I mean, that suggests a type of society that is far more advanced than we would first think. Bees as well, of course, are, highly networked and organized creatures. They can count, they understand the concepts of zero. Bumblebees can be taught to play soccer. I mean, they're quite intelligent kind of creatures. Wasps can recognize each other just looking at their faces, each other's faces. They can recognize individual wasps. I mean, it kind of points to a kind of a form of consciousness, certainly not the kind of human consciousness, I suppose, but a form of consciousness that we should maybe appreciate a little bit more. These aren't just kind of mindless kind of clumps of cells flying around mindlessly. They are all doing really important things to keep the earth ticking over.
Wow. They're not little zombies out for blood.
They aren't. No, as much as it feels like it sometimes with mosquitoes.
Yeah. And then the word empire too. There are, there's a queen bee. That kind of language infiltrates our world. We've applied the term queen to bees, and a lot of other insects have kind of hierarchies. Are there other ways that insect kind of systems mimic our own systems? And how do you kind of think about the fact that we actually operate our governments and medical paramedics and stuff in very similar ways to the insect community?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, the drone bees don't have much function other than to kind of service the queen and then die. ants as well are pretty selfless, most of them, and so are many other types of insects. I mean, they do a lot of kind of quiet. The average life of an insect, I think, is quite a kind of quiet, underappreciated, short life, where you have maybe one kind of small, tiny role, and then you perish. And even when you perish, you're of use, because a bird may have eaten you, or a frog may have eaten you, and that provides them with some food. And so some of the declines we're seeing around the world are not just of insects, but insect-eating birds. There's been kind of crashes in bird populations in Europe, some places in North America, even in the heart of the Amazon rainforest. The insect-eating birds are significantly down compared to those that eat other things. So yeah, it is interesting to kind of reflect on that. I don't think all of us are quite as selfless as insects. I think many of us see ourselves more as the main character in the show rather than the supporting cast. But certainly in our societies, there are those kind of hierarchies, of course, when you look at concentrations of wealth in our society, who's prospering, who isn't. Certainly there is a food chain that is literal as well as economic, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, we all do consider ourselves to be the main character, in charge of killing the insects, unfortunately. So in your travels for your research for this book, I would love to hear a little bit about the kind of people that you met and how, different kinds of scientists or other people are working around insects across the world.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really varied as well. So I went to a kind of green rooftop in New York City, where this kind of industrial area is trying to kind of regenerate itself with kind of wildflowers and grasses and so on a former factory roof. And some of the conservationists there are really kind of excited about regenerating that, kind of bringing green space into the heart of urban areas. You've got kind of this kind of hipster culture around urban beekeeping that's kind of taking off in many parts of the world. Everybody wants to kind of be a beekeeper. That is a bit of a double-edged sword, because it's kind of prioritizing honeybees, which are, they're an imported species that kind of dominates the landscape and pushes out kind of a diverse range of thousands of other types of bee that are already in place. But yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, California itself is a really interesting place, because honeybees are essentially an agricultural input, like a pig or a cow, or fertilizer or something like that, because they're so important for the pollination of crops. And the Central Valley is obviously such a huge kind of area for fruits and vegetables across the US and the world, that you meet kind of people you never thought you would meet. Like, I met somebody who's a bee broker, and her job, she works this kind of 2 months a year to match up farmers and beekeepers to ensure that farmers get enough bees to pollinate their crop. And she could do that for 2 months a year and then just play golf for the rest of the year. And I mean, it's a job I never knew existed, and now I found it's kind of a very lucrative job. Beekeepers themselves are really kind of interesting characters. It's kind of changed from a job where you kind of did it as a hobby. You created a bit of honey that you put on your toast, and it was all lovely. And it's turned now into this kind of never-ending kind of race to keep your bees alive, to fulfill contracts for pollination around the country. Blueberries in one place, or almonds in another, citrus fruits in another place. You travel around the country as this kind of never-ending kind of treadmill, trying to kind of bat away the kind of diseases and pesticides and all the other kind of things that are killing your bees, trying to reproduce them and keep the hive as healthy as possible. So that's changed a lot. And so finally, I would say the people I met in Mexico were wonderful, cared deeply about their environment, were very sad at the idea of the monarch migration coming to an end, which is predicted at some point this century, because climate change is making their habitat unsuitable for the trees that they favor. So they're actually can't move up the mountain quick enough to get to cooler places, the trees. So monarchs are going to have nowhere to overwinter, unfortunately. So that was quite a kind of confronting experience, but certainly a really fascinating one too.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking too. I mean, not just because butterflies are beautiful, but that there will be very visible consequences of climate change in this century. What can people do? Is there anything that a common person can do to kind of help or find hope or, prevent this crisis in small ways?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the problem can seem overwhelming, a bit like climate change, I suppose, but kind of unlike many of the other problems we have in the world, there are quite a few at the moment. We don't need to kind of invent a kind of space program or a new vaccine or anything like that to deal with this. Yeah. It doesn't need to be some kind of technological breakthrough or anything like that. I mean, there needs to be some new farming practices, for example, to use less pesticides and so on. But one entomologist said to me, it should be summed up as a kind of inaction plan rather than an action plan. We just need to kind of let go a little bit. I mean, we tend to kind of favor a very kind of ordered view of the world in terms of, plants go here. We like kind of manicured, kind of closely cut lawns that kind of roll out to the horizon. We like fields full of like single crops with no kind of weeds anywhere. We like a very kind of like tidy kind of world that's actually definitely for insects. Insects like the jumble of stuff. They like the mess, the scrub, the kind of different kind of plants that we call weeds. They rely upon, and so we've kind of destroyed that world for them, and it's causing huge problems for them. I mean, at home, if you have a backyard, you don't need to cut the grass every week. Maybe just let it grow a bit. Don't rake the leaves in your yard because there's lots of animals that live there. Maybe don't put chemicals all over your backyard. I mean, there's things you can do there. Favor kind of native plants, a diverse range of native plants rather than kind of really pretty ornamental plants that native pollinators can't do anything with. I mean, there are things that people can do. Obviously, there's kind of bigger things that people can do around, joining campaign groups, voting the right way, and so on. But certainly, there are things that you can do to just create a little bit of breathing room for insects to bounce back a little bit.
Do you think there's space in like education and early education for children to learn more about climate change and insects? Are there kind of like common assumptions that we are taught or come to know that you would have changed? Yeah,
it was really interesting speaking to one insect expert who actually does a lot of outreach with schools, and he was saying, you speak to kindergartners and they love insects and they think they're fascinating. They want to play with them. They think they're great. By the time you get to, high school, he said, everybody's repulsed by them. They think they're gross. And, that's because culturally, we've been taught to think that way about insects, that they are, pests. They are potentially harmful to us. We don't want them near us. And so I think there is probably a role in education to actually extend that kind of initial joy at seeing an insect. That's quite cool because they have such cool abilities. To maybe kind of nurture that a bit, explain the importance of them, that it's not just the kind of the big charismatic stuff in the world that we want to save. It's insects too. I think there's certainly a lot to be taught, I think, to children about ecology, how the world works in terms of the connections we all have to each other and the natural world, and how the natural world actually functions. It's the kind of old analogy of we think we're the pilots of this plane. We're not. We're at the back drinking martinis, aren't we? It's a bumblebee and and a few birds and some other creatures, the pilots at the front of the plane. And so we should probably appreciate that a bit better.
It's a very elegant airplane that we're on.
Yeah, it's classy. It's a classy
Yeah.
airplane. Yeah.
We just have to let them fly the plane.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about kids' fascination with bugs too, and the fact that many, or insects, excuse me, that many superheroes are insect related.
Ant-Man, yes.
Wasp, the Wasp, is that?
Is that one?
Maybe. Spider-Man.
Spider, yeah. I mean, spiders are technically arachnids, but yes, you're right. They do have that kind of fascination, don't they? And kind of mythologized in kind of big scary ways, as well as superheroes. I mean, if you just think about the I don't know if you caught any publicity around the murder hornet and its arrival in the US in Washington State last year. I mean, that was a really good example of that, about this idea of this kind of fearsome hornet coming over from Asia, and it's called the murder hornet, and it's gonna kill us all. And I mean, the reality is, of course, it doesn't murder humans; it decapitates bees. It's not good news if it spreads, for sure, but certainly we kind of like to jump on. We like to jump on certain insects and demonize them, for sure.
Mm-hmm. That very much like clickbait, I think.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I promised not to ask you what your favorite insect is, but you did mention that insects have a lot of cool abilities. So what is the coolest insect ability that you have come across?
Ooh, I mean, there's so many. I mean, honeybees can detect landmines better than sniffer dogs, which is kind of startling when you think about it. I'm not sure if they wear kind of helmets and that kind of, bomb disposal gear. I don't think they do. I think they just go out there and do their own thing. But that is astonishing. There's this beetle a water beetle that can escape being eaten by a frog by jumping out of its bottom once after it had been eaten. That's quite incredible. I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's a caterpillar that can create its own antifreeze to ward off being frozen to death. I mean, there's just so many weird and wonderful insects. There's a butterfly that has an eye on the end of its penis. I mean, they're quite bizarre kind of creatures. One entomologist said they're like kind of aliens on Earth, but they're kind of so adapted to this planet. I mean, they've been here 400 million years. They survived 5 great extinctions. They outlasted the dinosaurs easily. And that's because they are so kind of adaptable and so kind of extraordinary. And hopefully we can give them the chance to continue for a few more million years after this.
Yeah. If they survived 5 great extinctions, that to me feels a little bit hopeful that they will manage to, their almost superhero abilities to kind of overcome this one.
That's right.
If you would call it that at this point. So I have one more question for you, which is that your book was called A Wake-Up Call. And so I would like to hear how you feel about that. If you think, what is like the one takeaway that you hope people will come away with from your book, and kind of what that wake-up call exactly is for us?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it is. I mean, I know there's not a lack of things to worry about in the world at the moment, but I think if we take the kind of long view, the insect crisis is probably the broadest and deepest and most consequential of the kind of things that are going on right now, up there with climate change in terms of long-term impacts to the way that we function in societies. I mean, the world is growing in population. There's more mouths to feed at a time when pollination is crashing in many parts of the world. We're facing a kind of huge crunch point with I'll be able to just feed ourselves and be able to continue life as before. so much rests on these kind of slender shoulders of these small insects, far more than we appreciate or realize. And I think if I want people to take anything from the book, is that insects are our friends, they're our allies, they are beautiful in their own right, and they are worth saving. And I hope that if people can just take actions, kind of small and large, to help protect them, then we can give themselves a chance, but more importantly, I guess, for us, to give us a chance. I mean, this is a story of human conservation as it is of insect conservation. We won't last very, very long without them. So it would be a good idea to keep them around.
Yes, keep the plane in the sky. Keep us
exactly
in martinis forever.
Exactly, yeah. We can just get drunk at the back, it's fine.
Yes, it's okay. Stop mowing your lawn. Drink martinis in an airplane. That's the takeaway.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your extensive knowledge with us, Oliver. That I could talk to you about insects forever. Today's guest, was Oliver Milman, author of The Insect Crisis: The Fall of the Tiny Empires That Run the World. You can order your copy at skylitbooks.com. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylitbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.